worker stated, "It may be easy to fill her position. Taylor Self cannot be easily replaced." We also have a minimum of our appreciation for your service, and it reads, "Presented to KD's for faithful and dedicated service to the citizens of Stanley County on this occasion of your retirement. We extend our sincere appreciation for your service, wishing you greater achievement and awards in the future." Presented this 6th day of August 2012, Stanley County Board of Commissioners. Congratulations and thank you. I know Ms. Dees is walking out the door, but one of the things I wanted to mention about both of them was that it was listed here that they took pride in their work and responded to customers with respect and patience, or that they did a good job in working with the clients that they worked with. And we certainly appreciate that of all our employees, and I think that it can be said of most, if not all, of our employees. They do a great job in customer service, and we appreciate that. At the very beginning of the meeting, I mentioned that we do have a sign-up sheet. I understand that there have been some folks who have come in since I said that, so if you're hoping to speak during the public comment time, be sure to sign the sign-up sheet in the back of the room for us, please. Thank you. Our second agenda item is a request for the board to consider donation of county surplus equipment, and I believe our manager, Andy Lucas, is going to present that and maybe have someone come up and answer our questions if we have any.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. This request is actually from Homes of Hope, and I actually all my interaction was with Skeet Askew. Salem Taylor from the Homes of Hope is here this evening to answer any questions if you have any. But essentially, Mr. Askew is asking the board to consider donating surplus computers to the Homes of Hope, and their intention with those computers is to put them into their various homes so that the folks who are in those homes temporarily would have ability to use those computers to search for jobs, access the internet for maybe online classes or other things that anyone would use the computer for. And so that's the request. We've included some information about the general statutes that you have regarding the donation of property to a nonprofit for your consideration. No action can be taken this evening just based on those general statutes and the public notice requirements. But we wanted to make sure you were aware of the request from the Homes of Hope, and so that you all could take action at a subsequent meeting. And now, if you have questions, I would ask that you either direct them to myself or Ms. Salem Taylor. Thank you.
First of all, do we have any questions before we ask Ms. Taylor to come forward? If no one has any questions at this time, we won't bother her with that. Any questions? Any comments by commissioners?
Don't really have a question right now for Ms. Taylor, but what I'd like to say is I'd like for us to have more time to direct some questions to staff, to the IT department, and to have this perhaps placed on next month's agenda. That's a motion.
Okay, we have a motion that it be placed on next month's agenda. Do I have a second for that? Second. Have a second. Are there any questions or other comments at this time? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And we'll plan to put that, Mr. Manager, on next month's agenda. Thank you. The next agenda item is some requests for contract awards from the Stanley County Utilities Department. Ms. Donna Davis is our presenter. Good evening, Donna.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I do have two items for your consideration this evening. The first is the award of a contract for the relocation of water on Carpenter Road. This water line is being relocated because North Carolina DOT is upgrading Carpenter Road, and there is an apparent conflict with our water line, existing water line, and the widening or the upgrading of that road. And I did note for you that this is one that Stanley County will be paying for the relocation of. Apparently, there's some issues with, this was done several years ago, and there were some issues with whether it was documented properly who owned the right-of-way at the time. So since we can't clarify that, this is something that we would have to create a project ordinance for and be responsible for paying for. And that has already been identified and allocated in this year's budget. So we're trying to work with DOT so that they can maintain their schedule. And we received bids on Wednesday, July 18th. And I have included in your information the results of those bid packages received. And the apparent responsible low bidder is RDR Incorporated of Locust. And at this time, I would like authorization to award that contract to RDR Incorporated of Locust, North Carolina.
Okay, thank you, and I think we do have all the information in our bid packet to be able, our agenda package to be able to look at this. Are there any questions for Ms. Davis from any commissioners? Hearing none, what's your pleasure?
I move we approve. Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Dennis to approve and award this contract to the apparent responsible low bidder, RDR, and a second by Commissioner McIntyre. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And we'll move forward with that contract, Ms. Davis.
The next item is the request for authorization to submit an application for the 2012 Community Development Block Grant Infrastructure Program. This particular program awards grants in the amount or up to $750,000 for select infrastructure projects. I've included also in your agenda packet some little overview of the program, the infrastructure program, because at this time, not only are we asking for authorization to submit an application, the utility staff would like to recommend a particular location. First of all, these infrastructure community development block grants are limited in the area and scope that they can serve. They have to meet the program criteria set up by the federal government and the state of North Carolina Community Development Block Grant Program guidelines, which means it has to be a low, moderate income community that it's serving. We could select another location, but if the income guidelines are not met, we would not qualify and we would not be awarded. So we look for those areas of the community that match the funding that we have available. The approved activities are the installation of new public water and sewer lines, replacement of public water and sewer lines, replacement of appurtenances, improvement to water or sewer treatment plants with special problems, including, or for example, moratoriums or special orders of consent, and priority is given to drought-related activities. Again, the maximum grant amount is $750,000. There is a required local match of 5%, which would be $37,500, which would be allocated from utility funds. And the minimum need requirement is 70%. So to even qualify for this grant, to be considered for this grant, 70% of the residents who would be served by this system would have to be low, moderate income. The higher or the closer we are to that threshold, the more likely we are to be funded. The lower we are with regards to that threshold, the less likely we are to be funded. So this is a competitive grant process. The application window is August 31st, 2012 through September 14th, 2012. So we've got a little more than a month to prepare this application. And the review criteria set up by the CDBG program is severity of needs, benefit to low, moderate income persons, the feasibility of the project, basic required criteria, the level of readiness, overall priorities, and the commitment of other funds to the project. Do you have any questions? I have included a cost estimate to serve a section of Austin Road north of the intersection of Highway 73 towards Pennington Road. This is an area that we've had requests from folks for extended period of time, and it does, the community does meet the criteria, we feel that would give us a competitive application so that we could get the funds into the county.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your thoroughness in preparing this particular item. I think that we've got all the information here that we need and need to consider this item, and also you've presented it in such a way that everybody sitting here knows that as well, so I thank you for that. Good job. Are there any questions or comments by commissioners?
Yes, Ms. Davis, how many households would this possibly affect? Do you have a number?
We expect to be able to serve approximately 64 households.
64, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I entertain a motion as to whether you want to authorize the application of this 2012 CDBG infrastructure grant.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the application for the 2012 CDBG infrastructure grant program.
We have a motion by Commissioner Louder with a second by Commissioner Dennis. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? And thank you very much, and we appreciate hearing more from you about that.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item has to do with tax administration, and we have a presentation of an annual settlement and charge to collect. Malia Miller, our tax administrator, will be a presenter tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here to present the tax collector's annual settlement for fiscal year 11-12. In your packets, you have 3 financial reports. Is it? Can you hear me? Okay. In your packets, you have 3 financial reports. Included in those reports are the annual audit report, the analysis of the countywide levy, and the delinquent collections report. That's the first part of the annual settlement. The tax collector at the end of each fiscal year presents this settlement to the commissioners for approval. The real and personal property collection rate for the preceding fiscal year was 96%. The collection rate for registered motor vehicles was 86.77%, with the overall collection rate being 95.16%. The overall collection rate is slightly less than it was the prior fiscal year, which had an overall rate of 95.86. The Tax Collections Department has pursued all statutory remedies of enforced collections, attachment, garnishment, debt set-off. We continue to pursue that. Of those 3 financial reports, are there any questions?
Again, these are very well done and very complete. We appreciate that. Are there any questions by commissioners? Do you know where we, how we compare to other counties in the rate, and is it going down across the state?
I do think the rate is slightly less across the state, and I do think that Stanley County is slightly less overall. I do expect to see that rate increase as we are automating some procedures to enforce collections.
Very good. Mr. Manager, I also got a letter, I believe, that Tyler gave me about some legislation that I need to follow up with you. I think that there's some legislation that was passed maybe in this year's legislature that affects the particular vehicle rate as well.
Actually, that legislation was passed probably 5 or 6 years ago, and folks have been paying an extra percentage point, I think, or possibly even 2 on their late vehicle tax for the last 4 or 5 years. That's been going into a special fund that's been building this vehicle tax system. And what you'll do is that the bulk of the collection will no longer fall on the county. It will fall at the time when an individual goes and registers or their tag. They will pay the taxes at that time through the DMV. And so they're not going to be able to they're not going to be able to register in that tag unless they pay their taxes. And
That's
now it's
correct.
a little backwards. And so we believe that collection rate will go up. There's been some concern, I think, from some counties that they're going to have less collection as a result of that. But I think what they're missing there is the indirect cost savings of not having to utilize your staff to do those collections, and those staff can either be reallocated to other forced collection strategies, such as debt set-off, pre-foreclosure, foreclosure programs, those kinds of things to enhance your real estate and your other personal property collection. So I think that's been understated in some of those other counties that have shared concerns. I think you'll find that the overwhelming majority of counties and the association are very much in favor of the new system that's being designed, which will roll out in 2013.
Very good. And it may be that we can do some work in trying to alert our citizens of the change so that people are aware of that. Very good.
We will.
Are there any questions or comments from commissioners for Ms. Miller?
That's the first part of the settlement. The second part of the settlement is the affidavit that you'll find in your packet, which just states that I have a report on file in the tax office of taxpayers that still owe 2011 taxes. It's available for anyone to view if they'd like to.
And we do have that in the packet, and so at this point in time, unless you have other questions, I'd entertain a motion that we accept and approve the annual settlement report, and that we also charge the tax collector with collecting FY 2013 taxes.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve.
A motion by Commissioner Dennis,
Second.
second by Commissioner McIntyre. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Our next agenda item is from the Health Department, and actually there's two items on here. Our presenter is Dennis Joiners. Dennis, I'll let you introduce these two items that you have before us tonight.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good evening. The first item that I have, excuse me, is in relation to our home health program. As you may know, most of the therapy work that is done through our home health program is done through contracted positions, and most of those positions are short-term, sort of moonlighting type therapy work, not full-time on a consistent basis. And we have been having some challenges meeting some of the physical therapy needs here over the last really 9 months to a year, in terms of the frequency that we have to get someone in the home, turn them around. There's certain requirements that Medicare has that we have to be in at certain time frames. So we have been exploring the option of actually creating a physical therapy in-house position to take the bulk of the physical therapy work in-house instead of contracting with that. That's going to give us greater control of the work that goes on with physical therapy, and we think that will help us be more efficient in terms of the amount of nurse time that we need to coordinate therapy activities for patients, as well as being able to meet these different time frames that we need to meet for the program. We also think that if we can continue this effort, we should be able to perhaps see even more patients, which could, in essence, generate additional revenue for us. The home health program is a self-supporting program. It has sufficient fund balance to cover shortfalls at this time, and we feel that this is an opportunity for us to make it a little more efficient in terms of hiring a physical therapist instead of contracting. We will have to have a couple small contracts just to backfill, but I think that this will be a better efficient service for us in the long run. Given the fact that it is a specialty type position, we will need to be able to hire into the range a little bit for this because of the unique nature of this position.
Okay. Any commissioners have any questions or comments for Mr. Joyner?
Just one quick question. Would this be a recurring position year after year?
Yes, it would.
And do you anticipate having the funds available for that position?
Yes, sir, we do.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? What's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Commissioner McIntyre to amend the Stanley County Health Department's home health program budget for FY 12-13 to allow for an in-house physical therapist. A second by Commissioner Dennis. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Okay? And you've got a second item, I believe.
Yes, the second item is a request to consider a new Stanley County Animal Control Ordinance. We brought this before the board a number of months ago. It's been a long time. Gene, you may have been on the Board of Health when we were discussing it. It's gone back and forth to the Board of Health on several occasions, and they have reviewed it, and they have are recommending the document that you have in a draft form. I want to point out that the role of animal control obviously is first and foremost from a public health standpoint is in prevention of rabies spread in the community, prevention of bites and other attacks, and also to try to promote positive pet ownership and responsible pet ownership in the community. The ordinance review that you see is an extensive new ordinance, and I want to cover a few highlighted areas to just point out a few areas, if you'll bear with me. One of the first highlights is that this new ordinance redefines restraint on dogs as confined inside a 10 by 10 minimum kennel of sufficient height to escape or to prevent escape. It will still be deemed acceptable for a fenced yard or an area that at least has a 10 by 10 dimension as a minimum. It does allow for electronic fencing as long as the fencing is properly maintained by the owner. And it requires dogs to be leashed when not inside the home kennel or a vehicle. One of the areas that may be a bit controversial is that this ordinance does not allow or would not allow tethering with chains, cables, ropes, etc. after 6 months of the adoption of this ordinance, except for repair of a fence or something of that nature. We feel this ordinance provides measures that will better protect the residents from at-large dogs, better protect animals from unwanted contact with wildlife, and reduce possible rabies and other bite exposures. That's one aspect in terms of just the definition of restraint. The ordinance also includes or provides for better guidance on how and where animals can be kept and the type of care required. This includes upkeep of kennel grounds, providing proper housing and shelter, provision of shade during warmer months. The current ordinance, unfortunately, does not have adequate minimum standards for housing and shelter, and our officers oftentimes are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of trying to enforce change from some irresponsible pet owners. This new ordinance would require rabies vaccination verification on cats and ferrets to be kept readily available for animal control to review as necessary. As you may know, dogs, cats, and ferrets are required to be vaccinated by state law. This ordinance fills a gap that currently exists in our current ordinance by creating an inherently dangerous exotic animals section that prohibits residential ownership of non-human primates, members of non-domestic dog and cat families such as wolves, tigers, lions, bears, non-native and poisonous reptiles, insects, and spiders, and constrictors. This aspect would go into effect 6 months from ordinance adoption. One of the things this ordinance would do also is establish a civil penalty system for violation of various articles of the ordinance. Some of the penalties also include a graduated monetary fine system so that repeat offenders would face more stringent fines. We feel the civil penalty system will assist with ordinance compliance and reduce dependency on the court system for enforcement, except when absolutely necessary. If someone doesn't have a dog tag or rabies tag, it's kind of frustrating when you have to go in to court. It gets delayed, then it may get delayed again. From a public health standpoint, all during that time, you still have an unvaccinated dog out there in the community, which is not wise. It establishes more stringent, dangerous, and potentially dangerous dog requirements. These would include microchipping for identification, requirement of liability insurance, warning signage on property, and other restrictions to help ensure safety of residents and other pets. The new ordinance would provide better enforcement interventions for cats on other property and damaging vehicles and property as well. This includes having the capability to deem such animals as nuisances and requiring confinement if the problem were to persist. Currently, it's very difficult for us to engage in any action to control those actions. While we recognize the ordinance is lengthy compared to our current one, we do feel that it provides a more thorough explanation of requirements and consequences of the articles. We want to support, as I said earlier, responsible pet ownership. We don't want this to come across like we are wanting to put up too high of a bar for folks to reach, but we feel that that by having these requirements, we'll be able to protect the public in a positive way. We are requesting that a public hearing be set for the September meeting. We realize it's lengthy in terms of the amount of work that people would have to look at in terms of reading it and understanding it. And we also wish to make two small changes. One, add a civil penalty for failure to wear county tag was left out inadvertently in the civil penalty listing. So we wanted to add that. And also we wanted to switch Article 5 and Article 6, just the order of them. One of them, basically we've got a section on a dog, then a section on a cat, and then a section on a dog. And somebody on our Board of Health said it's never good to have a cat between two dogs, so we figured we needed to maybe switch those out. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Where will this information be available for the public to read and view?
We would have it available in our department as well as the county manager's department, and also post it on the county's website. And we could use it in other places. We could post it in other places also. Library. That would be fine.
Okay, are there any questions or comments for Mr. Joyner?
Dennis, before you mentioned switching the Articles 5 and 6, did you say something about the tag?
Yeah, in the
Would you say that again? I didn't catch all of it.
on the civil penalties, in the list of civil penalties,
Right.
It's got failure to wear rabies tag, which is a state requirement. We also require a county tag. We forgot to put the county tag listed there.
Okay,
we wanted
but you've
to
got
add
the rabies tag noted
Correct.
as one of those things.
Correct.
Okay, now, I'm just speaking for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have cats. My cats have vaccinations. They have their shots. They're well taken care of. Do you know how many collars my cats have lost? Because the collars that go on cats have the little piece of elastic. If anything catches it, boing, and it's off. You
Basic-
cannot keep the rabies tags. You can't keep the tax tags because the whole collar's gone.
And in terms of the cats,
And that's a civil penalty.
No, well, first of all, the vaccination, there's not a county tag for cats. There is a rabies tag for
Right.
cats. Our ordinance does not require that the tag be on the cat. It requires that the owner have ample access to the certificate
verify it.
or the tag to verify it in the
Okay.
event that there's an exposure. So, yes, if you can keep a tag on a cat, you're doing quite well.
That's why I wanted clarification from you. Thank you. And you and I have talked about this ordinance and parts of it multiple times, and I know it's been a long time in the process with the committee and the Department of Health working on it, and I appreciate their work and your work.
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Joyner? If not, can I entertain a motion that we hold a public hearing in our September meeting to present this information to the public? A motion by Commissioner Louder. Second by Commissioner McIntyre. Any questions about that? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Good, we'll be on the agenda then in September.
Thank you.
And we'll try to, and I'm sure you will, Dennis, but we'll try to see if we can't get information out to the public and make sure that they are aware of these locations where they can go and view and the changes that you mentioned will be made in that information. Very good. Thank you. Next item is discussion of the Swift Island Bridge DOT project, and our presenter tonight is Andy Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Earlier this year, the board took action to instruct the Department of Transportation to proceed with the design of the NC 2427-73 road widening project, with an alternative to keep and maintain the historic Swift Island Bridge in place. And that was simply to allow them to go through the process of doing the design so their cost estimates could be put to the right-of-way. The alternative route has been designed. The right-of-way costs are now available, which you see a description of that in your packet. And upon review of the right-of-way requirements and the fiscal impact, the board is now in a position to make a final decision on whether to accept ownership of the bridge from NC DOT as part of the road widening project, or to turn that offer down and have them proceed with simply constructing a new bridge and tearing out the old historic bridge. And so you have that information with the details of the $3.8 million cost associated with that. That will impact monies for Stanley County and Division 8's transportation, and that's been outlined here in this letter. And so I think the information speaks for itself, but I'll be more happy to answer any questions the board may have. Excuse me, I'm sorry, Division 10.
And for those in the room or who may be listening over the television for the broadcast, one reason we considered this previously was that DOT normally gives the cost to demolish the existing historic bridge to the agency or to the governmental unit that's willing to take over ownership. And that when we got this information previously, it appeared to us that there was an opportunity perhaps to break even, and I think most members of the board expressed a desire to keep the bridge and utilize it, especially in conjunction with the Valley Drive corridor, the Baden efforts for tourism, Mar Mountain, and also to connect over to recreational facilities in Montgomery County as well. This information that the manager went over just now added about $3.8 million to the project, and indicated that would be damaging to those other projects here in Division 10. So having that little bit of extra information, I'll turn it over to or ask other commissioners if they have comments or questions at this time. Hearing none, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we do not acquire the Swift Island Bridge from the North Carolina Department of Transportation.
Okay, have a motion by Commissioner Morton to not acquire the bridge.
Second.
Have a second by Commissioner Louder. Any other comments now? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? So we will let DOT know that as of this time, we're no longer interested in acquiring the bridge. The next item on the agenda is Connect Our Future, which is a program from Central Iowa Council of Governments, and our presenter tonight is Andy Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Chairman Donovan actually gave us a presentation earlier this year on the Connect grant that is a regional initiative and planning effort on the part of the Central Iowa Council of Governments. And it's looking at a multitude of different issues, from watershed issues to food shed issues to transportation, and it's a multi-county and multi-state effort. They received a federal grant. And this memorandum this evening just formalizes our participation in that process. It also requests that 2 senior staff members be named as primary and alternate appointees to the consortium, as well as 2 elected officials in the same positions of primary and alternate appointees. And so with that, I would, from a staff perspective, I would ask you to consider appointing Michael Sandy as the primary and myself as the alternate, and that will ensure that we will be represented from a staff perspective at these meetings. And certainly you all can decide amongst yourselves who will be the primary and alternate representatives. So I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
And it's my understanding that we're talking about 2 of us, not necessarily one of us and other elected officials throughout the county, because they're considering the same memorandum and appointing 2 from each jurisdiction. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, but I would also defer to you since you're on that board.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from commissioners about about what we have in front of us? There's actually 3 items to request the approval of the memorandum of understanding, to appoint the 2 staff individuals, and then to appoint 2 elected officials. I would volunteer to be either that primary or alternate, since I work with the COG already, if anybody else is interested in either taking the primary appointee or alternate. So what are your comments this evening?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the memorandum of understanding, that we name Michael Sandy as appointee and County Manager Andy Lucas as alternate, name you as primary appointee, and Commissioner Dennis as alternate appointee. Okay,
we have a motion you just heard by Commissioner McIntyre. I have a second?
Second.
Second by
I'll
Commissioner
second
Loud.
that, too.
Okay. You were slow on that one, Commissioner Morton. Commissioner Louder already beat you to that one. So making sure that you didn't have to serve that in an alternate position. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm sure there are none. Okay, thank you. And we'll work to try to make sure we get this information reported back to you as we hold these meetings, and it's going to be a very interesting process, I'm sure. Okay, the next item is our consent agenda. I'd request a motion to approve.
Chairman, I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments about the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So the consent agenda is approved as presented. We come now to the place on our agenda for public comment, and I don't know whether we've actually picked up the sheet from the back. While Andy is retrieving the sign-up sheet for the public comment, most staff, or certainly the administrative staff, receives weather warnings. And while Andy was sitting up here on his phone, he received a warning that Stanley County has a flash flood warning until 10:15 p.m. Many of you may have come through a storm on your way here I think a couple of commissioners did, and it certainly looked like it was pretty bad outside about the time that we started. So we wanted to make sure that you are aware of that. If you need to, check with someone. On the old Salisbury Road? Okay. If you need to check with any family member or anything like that, we encourage you to do so by text or by perhaps stepping out so that you won't interfere with the conversation that's going on in the room, but and certainly want you to be careful as you leave here this evening. We have two people who have signed up to speak about the Stanley County Animal Control Ordinance that was presented, item 5. Deborah Harvey and Daphne Smith. Are you still wanting to speak about that after hearing the presentation? Would you still like to speak about that tonight? You would? Okay. Whichever one wants to come forward, if you will, come up. Come up and identify yourself and let us know what you'd like to hear. Public comments in commissioner meetings are normally limited to 3 minutes, and our manager always is available to help with that, so he'll hold up a sign and let you know after when you've got 1 minute to go and 30 seconds to go, and the red tag means thank you very much. We appreciate you being here.
Okay, I think I got it.
Thank you, and
Okay.
provide your name and let us know what you'd like to speak about.
Okay, my name is Deborah Harvey, and I'm the daughter of Daphne Smith, and I'd like to speak about animal control here in your county. I am not from your county. I used to live here years ago. I moved away. However, in my county is where the little 4-year-old girl, I live in the neighborhood, that was mauled by a pit bull and killed just a year and a half or so ago. Well, I was here visiting my mother for a few days on June 25th, and I witnessed and was part of a horrible act from a neighbor's dog. Myself and my mother turned into her circle driveway. I was the driver of the car. I saw a large black dog in her backyard. I asked my mother whose dog it was. She replied, I don't know. The dog followed us followed the car up to the house, went to the back door and sniffed around, then came and jumped on the side of the car trying to attack me, but luckily I had rolled up the window so he couldn't get to me. However, we sat in the car, waited for the dog to leave. The dog left, went back down behind the garage. We went and unlocked the back door. My mom has a little 1.5-pound Yorkie, and the little dog came out, and she has maybe a little 10-pound mixed breed. And her little dogs ran out on the carport, and this big dog turned when he heard her dogs bark, came flying back up to the house and jumped on her dogs and started mauling them, biting them and slinging them. And, here I am, my mom's on the ground, she's crying, trying to get the dog out of the other dog's mouth, and I just went ballistic. I didn't know what to do. So I reached into the dog's collar, twisted it, cut his hair off, and I was able then to stand the dog up so my mom could get her little dogs and get inside the house, and then I released the dog. The dog has since then come back to the neighborhood. Her property joins the dog's property, so he comes there all the time. My mom's 74 years old, and she's a senior, and almost everybody in that neighborhood is a senior. And I just ask y'all to do something to protect the seniors. They can't have the grandkids there. I mean, you just need to do something to help the seniors in that neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate you, your comments. Ms. Smith, would you also like to speak? And again, I'll remind you that the manager will hold up signs and let you know how you're doing with your time. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I cannot even tie my little 2 dogs out on the carport or out in their kennel, either one, because this dog can jump my 5-foot kennel that I've got out there. And I have to be outside. I'm literally scared to be out there unless my neighbor next door is outside, and I feel a little bit safer and more secure because, as my daughter said, the dog was back up there July the 25th. And about 2 years ago, animal control was called out there when Mr. Ralph Myers was living. And that's when home health care was out there to come in to help take care of him before he passed. And animal control doesn't have a report of that, but they have 2 reports on me within 30 days of that dog being there. You never know when he's coming or anything like that. I think they should be kept in a chain link fence with a top over it if it's a mean dog, to where the dog cannot get out. You would hate to see a person like me or a lady that's 86 years old that lives in my neighborhood mauled to death by a pit bull. I'm not just throwing off on pit bulls, any mean dogs, what I'm speaking of. And there's a lady that works for the health department, is a neighbor of mine, and I'm sure that Mr. Joyner knows exactly who I'm speaking of. The dog was very vicious with her at one time when she was out walking her little dog. We feel very unsafe out there with that dog. He still ties the dog outside. I've seen it tied out there. And the day that he came out there the first time when the attack was, the dog had had no shots, not registered on taxes, but I was more concerned about him not having rabies shots and, you know, stuff like that. And I feel that a dog should not be left for 72 hours to get loose again and go attack somebody within the 72 hours of trying to decide if they're going to get the shots for the dog or what. I hate to be a nuisance or anything like that, but I feel we need some help on the large, mean dogs. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. And I want you both to be aware that, as Dennis said, that the ordinance that is being prepared, the draft ordinance is available. So we can certainly encourage you both to look at that and see if there's items in there that you feel like you can support that may assist your situation. So, and we'll have that public hearing next month. Okay, thank you. The next person that's on the sign-up sheet is Bill Harwood. Bill, if you'd come forward and identify your topic, and again, Mr. Lucas will let you know.
Thank you. My name's Bill Harwood. My topic is the dam project as usual. Last week y'all held a special meeting with the stated intent of correcting confusion involving y'all's position and the state's position and Alcoa's position on the Yadkin Hydro project. And I think that's a good thing. But I came away from the meeting more confused than I was when I went to the meeting. You didn't allow any public comments at that meeting, which I think would have helped because it could have been clarified at that time, I believe. However, Chairman Dunham, I'm afraid it's you and I because you spoke, and I'm speaking now, so it's kind of you and I believe that you stated that the value of Alcoa's Yadkin project was $365 million. That's based on Topeka's project selling for $600 million, and the various megawatt outputs of the two concerns. And then you stated that a return on investment of 10% would be considered normal by accountants, I think was your statement. I think it would be considered lucky by accountants personally. But anyhow, based on the 365 and the 10% return on investment, you stated that Alcoa made $36.5 million instead of the $10 million that they claimed to make as profit. You also stated, I believe, that you were under the impression their revenue was $74 million, and they have stated in the past that their revenue is around $40 million. Now, who's right in that, I certainly don't know and don't have any way of knowing. But with that as a background for this, and you know, I told you one time I thought you and I had different math professors. I think we had different accounting and economics professors also. I'm hurrying as fast as I can. At a perceived value of $365 million, not investment, we don't know what the investment is. It could be any figure. That's the value y'all came up with based on that sale. A return on investment of 10%. Therefore, Alcoa makes the $35 million as you stated. If this were true, then all someone has to do is make an investment, and they make money. That's not the case. You don't necessarily make money. You can have a negative return on investment, in fact. So to make the statement that it's valued at so much and they make so much, my accounting professor wouldn't like that, I don't believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harwood. The next person who's registered to speak is Vanessa Mullenix. Again, Ms. Mullenix, if you will, come forward and repeat your name and also identify what you'd like to speak about. And Mr. DeLucas will give you indication.
My name is Vanessa Mullenix, and I'm here to speak about jobs and trying to settle this relicensing issue. I'm for jobs. I've been for jobs all along. And as long as this county is fighting industry, no industry is going to look to come into this county. We have lost a tremendous 750 jobs and $400 million investment, and I wish we could just end it. And instead of working, trying to get jobs in, I have an email right here that's public record from the Secretary of Commerce's that clearly shows that you are trying to keep jobs out. And I will read this right from it, and you can go online or I'll give you a copy. This email was written on May the 20th, 2011. And it says, we have a problem with our efforts to recapture the Yadkin. We have asked ourselves why Alcoa has not been doing more with the bills as Senator Hartzell introduced. It appears they may have found a new way around all this, and our fear our governor's resolve on the matter is not strong. Stanley County and its manager and commissioners are worried about their finances and the ability to continue the legal fight. The Uwharrie Regional Resource Commission has no money. I'm leaving out a couple sentences, but I'll be glad to give every one of you a copy, and I have some for the audience if they want it. Alcoa has invested $10 million in Electronic Recyclers International, basically all the capital required to establish a business on their old plant site in Baden, so they can claim they are bringing 200 jobs back to Baden and take our argument away about jobs. So it was more important to make Alcoa look bad than to bring jobs in here. I have some pictures right here that I would like to give y'all of 800 people standing in line for 200 jobs. And they stood in line for 4 hours. And I'll be glad to give you these. It says, bottom line, this mediation meeting that is supposed to take place next week needs to be delayed for a couple of weeks. Whatever the reason, just do not let it happen. Do not know how Stanley County Commission can delay this, but we need to make sure how this hand is being played. I fear our deck has been stacked and we are about to be dealt the final hand, one that assures the public does not benefit and prosper from the most valuable resource. We have the most valuable resource. Alcoa has tried. They have demolished that plant. They have cleaned up all of their environmental and working on that. I wish half of the industries that have left cleaned up their mess. We have a responsible industry that is cleaning up and being responsible and taking care of their environmental, and they are trying to bring jobs to us, and as a county, we're spitting in their face. And I wish you would please put this to rest. We've been fighting it for 6 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mullenix. The other person that we have that's registered to speak tonight is Ron Bryant. Ron, Mr. Bryant, if you'd come forward and, again, repeat your name and mention your topic as well.
My name's Ron Bryant. Thank you for this opportunity. And it seems like you need some support concerning the relicensing situation, so I stand here to be your support. The folks who are supporting Alcoa talk about it being a responsible company and this sort of thing. I'm new here. I haven't been here for 100 years like Alcoa has, but I have read the history, and I know some of the things they've done. I've read the reports of testing of water samples, fish samples, and so on, so I know some of the other things they have done. I would ask those folks who are still supporting Alcoa to go on the internet, check Google, and look for all of the places around the world that Alcoa has been a bad corporate citizen. They are not a responsible company. They clean up when they have to. They say they will bring jobs after they get their license, not before.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Appreciate you being here tonight. And that's all the individuals that we have signed up for public comment. Next item on our agenda are general comments or announcements, and I would start over here to my right tonight with Commissioner Dennis. And Commissioner Louder?
No comment, thank you.
Commissioner McIntyre?
No comment.
Commissioner Morton?
No comment.
Okay, how about, we're very fortunate to have with us tonight our county attorney, who's, I think this is the first time she's been back after the birth of a child, so we appreciate you being here. Do you have any comment tonight?
Thank you, but no comment, sir.
And Mr. Manager, do you have anything?
No comment, thank you.
And I don't have a comment to make at this point either. I would entertain a motion for the commissioners to go into closed session to consult with the county attorney to discuss the 401 water quality permit intervention and APGI's public records request lawsuit. So moved. Motion by Commissioner McIntyre, second by Commissioner Louder. All in favor say aye. We'll consider ourselves in closed session. Thank you.